as possible at the end of her presentation to address questions and discussion points. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Our distinguished presenter tonight is Hannah Phillips, Manager of Docents and Interpreters here at the St. Louis Zoo. Hannah is also a certified instructor for the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation and has been working in zoos and aquariums for over 20 years. Take it away, Hannah.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to share my screen so we can get started. And here we go. Welcome, everyone. This is really exciting to have so many people interested in this very important topic to our times. This presentation is really a very introductory, cursory overview about how to have really good conversations around climate change. Not necessarily to convince people it's happening, because we know that it is. This is really about trying to help make improvements for the world and how we can be better and how we can help each other. I have a very brief 2 little videos just to help us get on the same page with some of the science. But one of the great things about just talking about climate change is you do not need to have a PhD in climate science or aerospace or any of these huge topics. Really just having a solid understanding of the basic science and how to promote solutions and keep people hopeful for making a change is really our focus today. So again, this is just a very cursory overview of some of how we have conversations at the zoo and how you might be able to take some of these techniques home with you to have other conversations with your family and friends. So I wanted to start out with the zoo's position statement on climate change. This can be found on our website in the About section under Mission and under the little letter from Dr. Bonner, our CEO and president. And it states that scientific consensus holds that climate change is interrupting natural cycles, causing habitat loss, and prompting more extreme weather patterns. All this affects animals. As a conservation organization, the St. Louis Zoo has a responsibility to constructively engage in climate change solutions. And this is our first step. We've had a green team and now the climate change task force, which Lisa is now our illustrious leader, and training up staff and volunteers to have these conversations with guests at the zoo and integrating it into some of our exhibit and our interpretation that way. So we really have been working on this for a while, and I'm so excited to have these monthly webinars promoting solutions and really allow us to explore the studio space of making the world better. So if we want to talk about climate change, we need to understand a couple of things. That the vast majority of Americans think that climate change is happening now, yet not everybody talks about it. They're nervous, they don't understand, they think they don't have the knowledge or background. And really what this means is everybody really wants to talk about it, they just don't know how to talk about it. And so I hope to go over a couple of techniques to help us get there today. By talking about climate change, this is a big solution for climate change because it shows others that caring for the climate is a normal thing to be concerned about, that taking care of others is an important thing to be concerned about, that the future of plants and people and animals really count on us being able to talk and work together to move forward. This is not about just you being one person having to go out and change the entire world. It's really about engaging with your community members, whether that's at your church, your synagogue, your place of worship, book clubs, schools, PTA, PTO, whatever it is. Those are all different types of communities where people working together can really make change. So the mission of NOCI, which is the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation, is really about coming up with researched, solid examples and techniques that many, many people can use, that we are all using the same language, no matter where we are in the world, to keep those messages consistent. There's been a lot of confusion, as many of you know and have seen on the news over the years, about climate change. And what these research techniques do, called strategic framing, is really help us give us a common language that we can use when having conversations. So the idea is that we train enough voices in proven communication techniques to shift the national conversation about climate change to be more positive, civic-minded, and solutions-focused. It's really important that we use a reasonable tone and not a crisis tone of voice when we're talking climate change. The crisis tone of voice puts people off. It sets up a wall. There's too big, it's too crazy, I can't do it. It's really off-putting. But if you are reasonable and set the chain of events, because of this happens, and this is what we can do about it, people get to solutions on their own in a really positive way, and you can simply move forward with that. So what is the core story of climate change? What we're trying to do is connect the dots for people. We know not everyone cares about the same things we do, so we need to appeal to values. Why does it matter to them? We also know that there's a lot of confusion about the causes, the effects of climate change, and so we need to be clear about how it works. And finally, we need to have people engage in a way that they're not the only ones out there doing it. We need to know how to improve the situation. We will spend a little time on each of these categories as we go through some slides. I do not have a list of solutions for you, and I will explain exactly why that is when we get to that section. So first, why does it matter to society? You heard me talk a little bit about values. Values help make our conversations relevant, especially if you don't know who the person is talking to you. There are some universal values in the world like family, love, beauty. We may define them all slightly differently, but the concept is the same. And Noki paired with an organization called the Frameworks Institute that did a lot of this social science research on what values specific to climate change are the stickiest and help bring people along in caring about something. Because just because you know about it doesn't mean you will actually do anything about it. You needs to hit your heart first before you hit your brain. So there's two values that the Frameworks Institute discovered are really pointed and sticky when it comes to climate change, and that is responsible management and protection. And we're going to dig into those in just a minute. Do we have any questions at all so far?
Not any yet. You're
Okay.
good to go. Oh, wait, we have one hand up. Jim, if you could type your question in the chat and the Q&A, we'll be able to get to it.
All right, so the first value we're going to talk about, there are a lot of words on this, but because this is being recorded, I'm not going to go through each one. You all can go back to the website, sdlzoo.org/climate change, to be able to review. But the responsible management statement to help someone care about something is that taking practical, common sense steps today to address problems facing our environment is in the best interest of future generations. And what we're trying to do here is cue up the idea that handling problems before they get worse can make a difference. We're being responsible with our natural resources. We're looking for evidence. We're being open-minded about the best way to solve our problems. Future generations depend on the decisions and plans we make today. And practical, feasible, step-by-step approaches allow us to make real progress on long-standing challenges and obstacles. And that's a really big thing when it comes to solutions, is it needs to be achievable. It needs to be accessible to folks from where they are. The other value you can use is protection, which means we must protect people and places from being harmed by the issues facing our environment. We want to preserve habitats and ecosystem. We're showing concern for the welfare of others is the right thing to do, stepping in to ensure people's safety, having a sense of agency, actively eliminating or reducing risks. And urgency is important. Vigilant we should be in shielding and safeguarding habitats and people from harm. Are there any comments in the chat about either of these values? I'll wait a minute for folks to chime in if they would like.
Sure, we had one thought from Jim in our chat. I'll just read it directly. That doesn't take into account other values such as personal freedom to choose that overrides those two. This was shown by Naomi Orinsky and her research. I have experienced this with some of the 6 positions or person types. It will work for the top 3.
So that's a really good point. Thank you, Jim. Yes, we want to be as relevant to the people we're talking to as possible. The best way to do that is to ask questions and find out where their values lie, and then you can adjust your conversation. We know, though, from the nationwide research that most generally, these 2 values are really sticky for most people. You know, many of you go out and you know your whoever in your family or your friends that you need to talk to and what their belief systems are and what they care about. And you can adjust your conversation for that. I, for example, had a colleague down in Texas who worked with mayors of towns and civic leaders and was really struggling with some of these values when really these leaders wanted to talk about money. And I told her, well, then that's what you talk about. If that's what is going to help them make a difference and make better decisions for the people in their community, then that's the program that you go with. But when you're just going out in the world and you're really not sure who you're talking to or what it is, these 2 are proven to be sticky for most people. Again, this is a big generalization, but it is rooted in nationwide research. Thank you, Jim. So we have a toolbox, and we're only going to do a little bit of this. But again, why does it matter to society? Here are 2 proven values that we know are sticky to most people. The how does it work? These are concrete examples of a really big and complex ecological system that is our planet. And what we know from more of this Frameworks Institute research is that the vast majority of people have the idea that the ocean is out there, that the weather's out there, that climate is out there, and they haven't necessarily connected the dots or seen how all of these things are connected. And it really is a big and complex system, our planet. And so what these metaphors do is help take a really big global amorphous thing and make it really concrete and really break it down to, because of this thing, this is happening, here's what we can do about it. It makes it very much more accessible. Regardless of values, you come with the heat trapping blanket. We'll watch a video in a minute describing that. People get, oh, we're burning too many fossil fuels. That's causing climate change. We should stop doing that. It's really incredible. And then the final piece, again, is how do we improve the situation? And we'll talk a little bit about community level solutions. So we're going to go in order here. We started with the values. We're going to do a little bit on the metaphors, and then we'll end with community level solutions and a complete sort of script of what a conversation might look like.
Hannah, we had a quick clarification question. When you're referring to different things as sticky,
Ah,
what exactly do you mean? I think I know.
I mean memorable. That something in the brain, it's remembered, it's important. Somebody goes, huh, okay. That usually means when learning happens. It doesn't just come in and then go in one ear and out the other. It means it stays. So we want these things to be memorable. We want people to have a good conversation and feel good about themselves at the end of it, because then they'll be remember more. We want people to be curious and to ask more questions and maybe go home and do their own research and maybe come back and ask you more questions. So that's what I mean by sticky, is that we want it to stick in the brain. We want people to be able to remember it. And so using universal values that were tested specific to the topic of climate change, along with these metaphors, really helps people understand what's happening and preps them for what they can do about it. The values really prep the brain, it's all unconscious, for caring about something. Now, when you're having a conversation with someone, you do not have to go in this strict order. In a conversation, you're going to be bouncing back and forth between these things based on who you're talking to, what the venue is, all of that. So please don't think that you have to go responsible management, heat trapping blanket, community level solutions. Conversations, we know, are so much more fluid. So again, these are just different tools in your toolbox that you can pull out based on whoever it is you're talking to. So what I wanted to spend just a teeny bit of time on is to make sure we're all talking the same language about the science. Like I said earlier, you do not have to have major schooling professionalism in climate science to be able to talk about it, because most people don't have that. Again, why should I care? What's happening? And what can I do about it? So the two videos I have are each about 90 seconds long each, or about 2 minutes. The first one is from Neil deGrasse Tyson from his Cosmos series, where he talks about the difference between weather and climate. This is something when I've given the longer, more in-depth versions of this training, and I ask people, what are the most common things you've heard when it comes to climate change? And everybody says, oh, but it was so cold this winter, the planet can't be warming, is one that comes up constantly. And that's where those metaphors become really helpful in helping people connect the dots, is they don't understand that weather is not its only thing, and the ocean is not that it's its only thing, and the climate is its only thing, that it's all connected. So let's just take 2 minutes and listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about the difference between climate and weather.
Okay, so if we scientists are so good at making these dire long-term predictions about the climate, how come we're so lousy about predicting the weather? Besides, this year, we had a colder winter in my town. For all the scientists know, we could be in for global cooling. Here's the difference between weather and climate. Weather is what the atmosphere does in the short term, hour to hour, day to day. Weather is chaotic, which means that even a microscopic disturbance can lead to large-scale changes. That's why those 10-day weather forecasts are useless. A butterfly flaps its wings in Bali, and 6 weeks later, your outdoor wedding in Maine is ruined. Climate is the long-term average of the weather over a number of years. It's shaped by global forces that alter the energy balance in the atmosphere, such as changes in the sun, tilt of the Earth's axis, the amount of sunlight the Earth reflects back to space, and the concentration of greenhouse gases in the air. A change in any of them affects the climate in ways that are broadly predictable. My friend's meandering represents the short-term fluctuations. That's weather. It's almost impossible to predict what will attract his interest next, but not hard to know what the range of his meandering will be, because I'm holding him on a leash. We can't observe climate directly. All we see is the weather. The average weather over the course of years reveals a pattern. I represent that long-term trend, which is climate. Keep your eye on the man, not the dog. Weather is hard to predict, like my friend here, but climate climate is predictable. Climate has changed many times in the long history of the Earth, but always in response to a global force. The strongest force driving climate change right now is the increasing CO2 from the burning of fossil fuels, which is trapping more heat from the sun. All that additional energy has to go somewhere. Some of it warms the air. Most of it ends up in the oceans. All over the world, the oceans are getting warmer.
Neil does such a good job. The next video I want to show you is from NASA.
Okay, so if we scientists are so
Sorry
good at
about
making
this.
these dire
And this is a short 90-second video, and they use the heat trapping blanket metaphor that we're going to get into shortly from the Toolbox. And so this is what we refer to as strategic framing, where you're really thinking about your conversation and really making purposeful choices about the words you use and how you use them with the person you're talking to. And this is just a fun little video, but it does a great job in getting the cause and effect of climate change really, really short. You don't necessarily have to have a huge, massively long conversation. You can have these conversations in just a few minutes pretty easily with most people. So we'll take a minute to watch this.
The carbon crisis in 90 seconds. This is a banana. This is a chunk of coal. The banana is sweet and delicious and fun to eat. The coal is, well, none of those things. But they are much more alike than they seem. Both were made by plants and store energy from the sun and carbon gas from the air around us. When you eat the banana, you use the energy stored in the banana to run and jump, and you release carbon gas back into the air around you. Now, carbon in the banana is young, fast carbon. Just weeks ago, the banana was carbon gas in the air, and hours after you eat it, you breathe out the same carbon back into the air. When we burn coal in power plants, we use the energy stored in the coal to generate electricity that powers our homes and factories, and we release carbon gas back into the air around us. However, the carbon in the coal is old, slow carbon. Plants took the coal carbon out of the air hundreds of millions of years ago. That carbon has been locked up ever since, and would stay locked up if people hadn't dug up the coal and burned it. So now, by burning coal and oil, people are adding lots and lots of old carbon to the atmosphere, faster than plants in the oceans can take it out. Why do I care? Because carbon gas in the atmosphere acts like a blanket, trapping heat and making the whole planet warmer.
Hi, my name is Peter, and I'm an earth scientist at NASA. At NASA, we use satellites to study the Earth and how it's changing. And we can see that the ice caps and the glaciers are melting, and that the land and the atmosphere and the ocean are getting warmer. So I know that it's important that we are very careful about how we produce and use energy so that we burn less fossil fuels so we can keep the planet from getting too warm.
NASA is a great, great resource. Their climate information is fabulous. So what this video and what the heat trapping blanket metaphor does is, again, it takes a very big, huge, complex, systemic idea about how the planet runs, or how the planet actually does run, and makes it really concrete. Because of fossil fuels, we're burning more and more carbon dioxide, just trapping heat in our atmosphere, acting like a blanket, making the earth warmer, which then pick your issue and add that in. When people hear that, they automatically go to solutions themselves, because they know, because of this burning of fossil fuels, this thing is happening. And so you say, so what can we do about it? And they'll say, well, maybe we should have more public transportation. They'll come up with solutions themselves, which is really great. When you're having your hopeful conversations, the best thing that can happen is if someone has some self-discovery. That's the most memorable and to help them along in that conversation. And some people you don't ever get there. For some people, it's simply just helping them understand the cause and effect, and that's okay. But hopefully you've done it in a way that is enjoyable with a reasonable tone that inspires them to go learn more or come back and ask you more questions. So when we talk about solutions, the biggies that we want to focus on is shifting our energy away from fossil fuels towards renewable. We want to be more energy efficient and, of course, talk about it. And there's many multiple levels of all of these in the conversations that we have with folks. And again, you all know the people you're talking to. You know which solutions and which kind of things to focus on. These are just some of the big examples we know meet the needs of a lot of people. And what's important about these three things is that they are collective, they are local, and they exist already. One big thing a lot of people say is, well, I've got solar panels on my roof, but my neighbors don't. And there's this individual piece to it, and it can be really lonely. And so the global climate issue is so big that individual solutions are ineffective. People don't feel like it actually makes a difference. So when you come at things from a collective standpoint, community, however you define community, you create a solution that better matches the scale of the problem. Also, people really like joining stuff and they want to join others who believe and feel the same way about something. It can be very much empowering and really help people move forward and making good choices for the climate. So let's take a pause and see what questions or comments we have before I put the whole thing together in this nice little script that I wrote.
So Hannah, we actually had a really good question that I kind of want to turn into a discussion point. So
Sure.
you can do that now or when you're all done, but I'll let you decide when it makes the most sense. But Julie asked, hold on, let me pull it up. There it is. As a teenager, she's not always listened to or trusted by the adults that she talks to. Is there a way that she can make them listen more?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the reasonable tone of voice, so being very matter of fact is the best way to describe it, would probably be good. Being really clear. Because of this is happening. One thing you'll be interested, and I'm sorry I can't pull the actual source, but there was a study a bunch of years ago when I worked over at the Oregon Coast Aquarium about teens. And believe it or not, most adults feel better about getting their information about climate change and science from teenagers, and feel more hopeful because they feel they have more energy and are more pumped for it. So hopefully these techniques that we're going through today, and again, this goes way deep. These are major trainings that we do and really dig into each of these sections. We'll give you a few tools to help you have those conversations. But I can't emphasize enough the importance of keeping a reasonable tone of voice, because there's so much noise, because it's so much that, you know, Chicken Little, the sky is falling all the time. People are freaked out. And when people are freaked out, they don't listen. They put up a wall. It's too much of a big deal. It's too big for me. But if you keep it simple and to the point and conversational, ask a lot of questions. People really like to talk. So ask a lot of questions. Ask them, how do they know that? And maybe you have sort of short, smaller conversations. But that reasonable tone and going step by step, connecting the dots really clearly for people goes a long way. I hope that was helpful. So let me take a minute and I'll show you this little script that I wrote. And again, this is a script really pointing out each of the elements that we've talked about. In a conversation, it's not going to be scripted. You're going to be going back and forth and answering questions and having an actual conversation. But here's how something might look. We at the zoo want to take common sense steps today to prevent problems for future generations of animals and people due to climate change. There's our responsible management value. Our use of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas for our energy needs is releasing more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, where it acts like a heat-trapping blanket, causing the planet to warm. This causes plants to bloom before the pollinators are present to feed and help plants reproduce, which impacts our ability to have food. So here you have the cause and the effect and how it impacts people and animals. We can make a difference for people and our planet by reducing our fossil fuel consumption now at a community level. In St. Louis, our civic leaders approved a measure aimed at powering the city entirely on renewable energy sources, including wind and solar, by 2035. By contacting your civic leaders, you join others in encouraging those leaders to take action on this important issue to you and your community. So there's your collective solution. Join others in voting for things that matter to you. If climate is something that matters to you, then join others in promoting that in whatever candidates programs you can find. How does this sound to everyone? There's a little thumbs up in the chat, or seems to make sense. And again, this is a script, and in a conversation, you'll be much less formal.
We got a thumbs up, Hannah.
Okay.
Here comes a
I
thumbs
was
up.
just gonna say that.
And some smiley faces.
Great. Again, this is just one example. So, what are key takeaways from all of this? Be specific. Try to be as specific as possible with your examples. Concrete examples help show that change is possible. Be explicit about how people can work together to push the solution forward. Reinforce other frame elements. Remember, I said this is called strategic framing. You are setting up your conversation, framing a conversation around climate change. These are, the key pieces of the story. People respond to story. We want to create a story for them. So you want to cue up the responsible management or the protection value to remind people why the action matters. Explain how the solution helps reduce carbon dioxide emissions. And remember, we're all in this together. We're not out there by ourselves, alone, swinging, trying very hard to do this. We want to reinforce that concern for the climate is normal. We want to invite people to talk to others. And we want to avoid that polarizing language. Again, that explanatory tone. Of 2017 frameworks went back and did some more research about kind of what polarizing language there is. And one polarizing language is when you use the word politician, there's like flags that go up for people. They discovered that when you change out the word politician with the word civic leaders, which is why I had civic leaders in our solutions, people are suddenly much more reasonable about it. So using the word programs instead of laws, those kinds of things can really help keep that conversation moving forward. Now, the solutions I wanted to talk about, I'm not giving you a list. We know that when you give people a list of solutions, they maybe just do one of them. They don't build on it. They don't go and do more. So we also know that individual solutions, although that's great that people are taking their own actions, that it doesn't really address the issue. And again, they don't necessarily take that next step. So thank you for driving a Prius. And have you thought about considering joining this group in your area that's working on this thing? So what you're going to have to do is come up with a couple of examples at maybe the, smaller community level, regional level, state level. That's what I do, is I have 2 or 3 in my back pocket that I kind of go to. And I tell people to find something similar in their area. Now, what's really great about these climate change community forums that we're doing is once a month, we're going to be featuring different speakers that will hopefully, if you come back and do more of those, will help you build your own solutions bank, give you more and more examples, particularly from our area, that can help you have really productive conversations with folks. There's also an entire community of people on climateinterpreter.org. This is where the Noki community, everybody who's gone through training, it's free to sign up and join. There's a ton of resources here, from curriculum to videos to multimedia resources. It's a really great site. There's also ability for conversations. You can follow them on Twitter and Instagram and the various social medias. And there's my contact information. So we are at the end of my slides. And I want to thank everybody for chiming in and interested. Going to open the floor a little bit to some questions and comments for the next 20 minutes or so. I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Awesome. Okay. So we've got a few things in the chat and a few things in the Q&A. So Wanda, if you want to tackle chat, I can tackle Q&A.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we have the first comment that we have is from Evelyn, and she says, a solution that involves contacting civic leaders may not make people feel they are making a difference. Showing people how they can do things like recycling or cutting down on energy use would be more effective.
Thank you, Evelyn. Yes, so the individual solutions like becoming more energy efficient in your home and those concrete examples are important. They are important, and they are important for people to do. However, to address the climate issue, because it is so huge and global, many people feel that when they do those things, they're the only ones doing it, and it's not really making that much of a difference. So if we really want to empower people and make them feel really good about taking those actions, it might be more about joining a co-op electric, a company that's a cooperative electric company, right? Or maybe it's one of my favorite examples of a community level energy efficiency program is some schools, they call it the Green Cup Challenge, where the students in one school, along with the PTA and the teachers, do an energy audit of their entire school, and they challenge another school to do the same thing, and then spend a year bringing down their energy use, and whoever does it the best, gets a trophy of some kind. And that's a collective thing of everybody working together to solve this problem. And that's really what we're going for in these community level solutions, is that to really help people feel empowered, that it's not just them putting solar panels on their roof and nobody else is. That joining piece becomes really important. And the community part is, I wanted to make sure everybody really understands, this community doesn't necessarily mean your neighborhood or running for office. It's your school, it's your place of worship, it can be book club, Facebook, it can be all kinds of things. But the point is that it's collective, and that's really where we want to push for. And if you are living that with solar panels and an electric car and everything, it's a really great way to show people how much you care about this thing. So it is important to do those.
So just to sum that up, I think it kind of is not either or, it's both solutions, and the importance of kind of communicating both of those, and in those different conversations that you might have with specific people, you might be able to kind of get to that collective vision versus the individual choices. Lisa, do you want to ask or do you have a question you were going to go to next, or do you want me to continue?
Yeah, we can go back and forth. So we have a lot, so we've got a few questions, and a lot of them really have the majority of solutions thinking, which is awesome. So we're getting there. The first one has to do with switching to a plant-based diet and its impacts, and how that kind of works in a zoo setting as well. So Wanda, I should have introduced Wanda and her title, but she is, and Wanda, I'm sorry, Sustainability Director, right? Okay, good.
Director of Sustainable Operations and Construction Management. So it's very long. I wouldn't expect you to, have that off the top of your head.
Fancy. So Wanda is our, for the zoo, all of the green initiatives that we take is under Wanda's purview. So the question is really, should moving to a plant-based diet or reducing meat be part of this conversation as a solution? And how does the zoo do that? So I know we have, meatless specials and really push that within our zoo community. But I thought both of you guys could take a stab at that one.
Yeah, I'll go first with the answer is yes. Yes, that is the thing that everybody should talk about. Again, this is really about knowing the person you're talking to. And the pieces that we went over in this are really, they're meant for a very broad, very, very broad audience, very, very general idea. And again, you all know who you're talking to, and by asking them questions and coming up with solutions, and that's the piece about solutions that's so important, is that you need to make it achievable for that person. So not everybody might be ready to, I don't know, petition their entire town to put solar panels on everything, but they might be ready to sign a petition or call their legislator or civic leader, sorry, right? Plant-based diet might not be feasible for everyone, but having that conversation around it and the possibility and the impacts that can have is absolutely important. Wanda?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And again, kind of going to what Hannah just said, it doesn't necessarily have to, success or progress doesn't have to mean you are vegan. It could be that you reduce your meat intake by, a certain percentage. You maybe choose to not eat meat on Mondays. That's a really big one. We do have specials at our restaurants that are meatless Mondays. A really great local organization is our Green Dining Alliance. And so part of that is there are restaurants throughout the city and county that are certified by the Green Dining Alliance. And there are many different things that you do to kind of become part of that. But one of them is making sure that you're offering enough protein options that are vegetarian friendly or vegan friendly. And so by doing that process and becoming certified under Green Dining Alliance, we introduced our falafel sandwich option and vegan burgers to make sure that we're offering options for people and enough protein options, honestly. So it's not just salad that you have to eat when you come to the zoo if you're vegetarian or vegan. So that's something that we've certainly introduced more of those options in our restaurants.
Yeah. And the knowing where your food comes from is also really important. So hitting those local farmers markets where you're hitting a farmer who maybe is using more sustainable practices, that can be economically out of reach for a lot of people. However, it is another solution to support your local farmers market, because then your food's not traveling as far to get to you, so you're not burning as much fossil fuels. And that's the other thing that the zoo does, is we absolutely know where all of our food comes from. We've got a pretty in-depth process for that. And we try to get it as sustainably as possible. For example, all the fish we use to feed the animals that are marine animals is all sustainable seafood.
Fantastic.
And there's one question came up. One, is there a website to find out which restaurants are on the Green Dining Alliance? I figure that was a quick.
Absolutely. And a quick Google search will get you to the Green Dining Alliance website. And honestly, it is a fantastic organization. So if there's a restaurant in your area that you love to go to, this is another kind of climate action. You can tell them about this program, and it's really great because it's very hands-on. They actually have a representative come out and do an audit with you. So there's somebody kind of looking at your cleaning practices, your, what kind of cleaning products you're using, what are you doing for water reduction or energy reduction. It really hits on a whole lot of levels beyond the food questions. And it's a great program. And yes, you can definitely, they're on Facebook. And so a lot of restaurants that you might go to have like stickers on the windows that'll say Green Dining Alliance certified. And the nice thing about it too, it's every year you have to recertify. So it's not something that you can say, you did it one time, great. I met all these things, and a few years later, everything changes. Every year you have to recertify. So they have to, audit you again and all that. So it is a really wonderful program and definitely a great resource in our area.
Parallel to that is the Green Business Challenge, which we've been a participant of over the years. And I assume you can do the same Google search and find those businesses that are doing energy efficiency and energy audits and help support them as well.
Absolutely. And that's an annual thing as well. And so this challenge for 2021 is kind of closing up right now, but next spring, usually around February or March, that's when that reopens again for that year. So again, if small business owners or large business owners, that's just another way to sort of encourage that collective action from a business or commercial side of things to push the needle in our area and collectively. So absolutely. I did have another question in here. Maybe it's a comment, so I'll roll into that. So Jim Jordan's was saying, my experience with working with, okay, let's start that over. My experience with working with or helping people move towards your example is that it is the privileged upper middle class or higher. The majority of people always place economics in the forefront of feeding my family, safety, education, etc. So how would we really have those conversations more to make sure we're addressing everybody?
Yeah, Lisa and I actually were just talking a little bit about that before we got started, particularly those individuals in areas where they don't have a lot of options for where they get their food or how they get their energy. And there are, just for example, this is not in St. Louis, but a colleague of mine lives up in way tippity northern Vermont, close to the Canadian border, and her husband works for a group that does energy audits for low-income people and helps them through grant money get more efficient water heaters. It's a really neat program. So that's one organization doing those kinds of things in a really rural area in way northern Vermont. But you're absolutely right, is most people, if they're just trying to feed their family for a day, trying to think about these bigger issues can be really, really challenging. But these issues impact and make those problems worse for those people. And we start talking about environmental justice and accessibility and what that means. And so this is why the community level solutions become so important, is because it's this huge push we need to do from multi angles. It's not just energy, it's not just transportation, it's all the people working all these things all at the same time together. So again, you do have to really think about your audience and who you're talking to and what their needs are. And that's why I can't emphasize enough that we're not here to preach, we're not here to lecture people, we're here to ask questions and get to know them and find out and provide them examples of where they can plug in to the process. And yes, a lot of the solutions that I gave examples of are ones that I have the ability to be accessible to. So those are the ones I know about, but it doesn't stop me from asking a lot of questions and learning from colleagues about these other avenues for helping. That's a really good point, Jim. Thank you.
So I had another question, and I was actually typing the answer, but we can do it now. So it's a great question about, so talking about electric vehicles. So as an alternative and as a solution. But here in Missouri, pretty much all of our electricity comes from coal. So, which is, burned and creates CO2. So I was just going to answer that while yes, in Missouri, most of our electricity does come from coal. Electric cars still offer a future for alternative energy because you could power your electric car with wind energy, with solar energy. It doesn't have to be gas. So, but I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to add on to that.
I know power companies are starting to feel the hit with a lot of this, and people calling and really making a point, and industry practices changing and regulations, programs coming in. And many energy companies are starting to buy fields to put up giant solar panels. So there is a shift, and we all need to keep demanding that. I know on many different energy bills, depending where you live, sometimes there's a little box that says, yes, I want my energy to come from renewable resources or offset, or yes, please charge me 1 cent a month to make that happen. And the more people that do that, the more you're telling the companies that's an important thing, and the more they will shift that way.
I'd like to just add a couple more things to that. So the Union of Concerned Scientists some years ago, I haven't seen the latest research, but they actually did the scientific study of, even if you live somewhere like Missouri, where a lot of our power does come still from coal and fossil fuels, it is still better to have an electric vehicle than it is to have a combustion vehicle. So that is still the better option, even if you live somewhere that that's not our primary source. So Union of Concerned Scientists, you can kind of look that up a little more if you want to. And then the other thing I will say is that our local utility, Ameren, is actually very interested and invested in promoting electric vehicles. I mean, it makes sense because certainly electricity comes from them, right? So they actually have some really fantastic incentives out there right now that are pretty new. I think they were just introduced this year, but they'll pay up to 50% of the installed cost of electric vehicle chargers for commercial properties. I think they do have some residential incentives as well. So I think certainly there's going to be more and more of a push there, and they are also continuing to increase the amount of renewable energy in the power grid too. So that'll continue to get better.
I also just want to point out that it's pretty impossible to be absolutely pristine and perfect in our environmental choices. Sometimes we absolutely don't have it. I don't have a choice where my power comes from right now. We've got Ameren, and that's what we have to do. So I check the little box and I do all these things. And that we really need to make these things accessible to people from where they are. That being relevant piece becomes so hugely important. And if we can do it from a level of where they can join others, it's not just them, it makes those programs more accessible and a little bit more empowering to get on board with. So also understand that sometimes people just do the best they can with what they have, and clearly they're trying, and that's really good too.
So I think we have time for one more question, and it's a good one. And Wanda, I think this one's for you too. Do we have any strategies, or has this really come up when talking with people about people concerned about the loss of jobs because of climate change solutions? So the change in energy, the change, and like you said, Hannah, the pressure that's coming up. What are your thoughts on that? Or have you had those types of discussions before?
I haven't had too many. It hasn't come up in my conversations that I have, but it is a concern that has floated out in the world. And one thing that regularly comes up as a piece of that when I've had conversations, and not even for me, but from the other people, is training programs. And that if we are continue to evolve as a society and as a world, there's lots of jobs that don't exist anymore because we have cars now instead of horse and buggies, right? There's always been this transition, and hopefully there can be programs or things that can happen that can help transition folks from one type of skilled labor into another one. There's some jobs that are just going to go away, which is really too bad. And that sort of has always been the evolution of technology as we move forward in a society, in a world as new innovations come. And innovation is a value that you can queue up for responsible management. And it's a very strong United States of America value, is that we are innovative and creative to make change. And people look to us for our innovation and creativity to change and evolve and solve these problems. Wanda?
Yeah, I mean, I think you answered it really, really well. I mean, for example, solar panel installation and installers, that's a growing career and a growing trade, and it's a really well paid and you know, certainly safer than, for example, coal mining. Like, you don't, if one of those sort of is on its way out, we need to make sure that we're just, the biggest thing I think is that we're being inclusive in making sure that everyone has access to that training. And there are some really great organizations. There's one that I just learned of recently, and I'm not thinking of the name of it here. But there's an organization here locally that trains young people that are kind of interested in learning how to build, and also kind of in this more sustainable way, how they can get into those career choices. So I think the biggest thing is just making sure that we're reaching all of the community and not just certain segments of the community that are getting access to these new jobs and new trades. But I totally agree that it's throughout history, it's always been the case that you know, certain jobs go away and others replace them. So we don't have a whole lot of telephone dispatchers out there anymore, because that is not a thing we need. But yeah, so it's just a matter of making sure that we're giving those opportunities to everybody across the board.
Thank you so much, ladies. And it is right at 6:30. That is actually incredibly impressive. Well done, guys. So, and that was all the questions. Some of them I was able to tackle through just typing them out, just to make sure we could get to everybody. So thank you so much, everyone who was able to stick with us for the full hour. And thank you for joining us tonight. And huge thanks to Hannah for her fabulous presentation, and to Hannah and Wanda for facilitating our discussion. Please be on the lookout for information on next month's Community Climate Forum webinar, which will be held on October 14th at 5:30 p.m. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.